Dude, let's just begin there. I think this is episode 47. Jesus, I'm bad with my episode numbers, man. I always get it confused. But episode 47 with Jüri. How the fuck do you say your surname?
I think it would be.
And
yeah.
And if you had to say in Estonian, hello everyone, my name is Jüri. I am 40 years old. I'm a father. How would you say that in Estonian?
Tere, mina olen Jüri ja ma olen 40-aastane lapsevanem, isa.
How old are you actually?
I will be 41 on next Monday. Yeah.
Yeah, man, congratulations. So I invited Jüri to come talk today. I know Jüri from my time in Warsaw in Poland. We spent about almost 18 months to 2 years together there. And today's conversation is just talking about what the fuck does it mean to be Estonian. And I'm going to chat a bit to Jüri and figure out a little bit about his country and his upbringing. And yeah, man, so welcome, dude.
Hey, how are you doing? Thank you
yeah,
for
man, I'm cool. Listen, where does this Estonian language come from? What is the mixtures? Because I remember when we used to spend time together, I always said it sounds like there's some Arabic in there, there's some Slavic in there. Like, what's the combinations?
Well, Estonian language belongs to Finno-Ugric languages family, which is the places which have a country and a land, and official places are today Finland, Estonia. Hungary is our very remote relative language-wise, but that relation goes back to like 5,000 years ago, so they are not really sounding very similar. Finnish and Estonian can be sounding very similar. And there is a whole bunch of other smaller languages which are like, especially in North and Northwest Russia, in modern-day Russia, they have these local dialects. Vepsa, Vadja, Udmurdi, Komi, the kind of names which you probably have never heard and will not hear again. So that's Northeast Europe and West Siberia. So that's the general direction where you look for these languages.
And if you grew up in Estonia, does that mean that you're able to speak Russian?
Well, I was born 79, so I'm really like a Soviet Union era product, which makes me educated in Russian language almost since the kindergarten. And we were kind of a mixed family. My granddad was Lithuanian, and the kind of second language in granddad's family was always Russian, because nobody in Estonia speaks Lithuanian, and he had, I think, quite a lot of difficulty with our language also. So the common language was Russian sometimes not.
And like 0 to 10, how good is your Russian?
I don't know, man. Today, after living nearly 10 years in Poland, it's gone actually backwards. I'm mixing it up badly with Polish, but I would say 6. Can't write anything though. Can read it, and simple conversations, understanding, okay, speaking, yeah, I can get my coffee probably. Yeah, I'm just probably a little bit more than coffee, but you know what I mean. It's when you don't have a practice with some language, it's there. It will take time, and then it's usable again.
Dude, you said that you were born almost like as a product of the Soviet Union. What's the feeling that Estonian people your age have towards Russia and Russian people in general? Can you talk about that?
Well, we can say in very general terms, it's a kind of mixed feelings. So we had this Soviet era childhood. There was like a lot of funny cartoons on the TV, and Soviet television was the only television that was really out there, except north of the country could get a glimpse of Finnish television, which had cool cartoons and stuff, and they speak Finnish kind of by default, my age people. But I'm from the south. I grew up in the south of Estonia. So, yeah, out of big town, people towards Russian, they didn't have really contact. But I have heard that from my age guys, they in the bigger places where was more Russians, they had fights there, and they had gangs ganging up against each other and that kind of stuff. And that's just 80s kids, right? So in my neighborhood, I think there was a couple of Russians which were like pretty much assimilating in the society locally in the countryside. Spoke with accent, that's it. Otherwise, there was no big difference. We were messing around the same way as anybody. But of course, then the Soviet collapse and re-independence years, that created a lot of like a fear, anxiety, and there was this, I think there is like a, people have like a culture of this trauma of the occupation. And that's not only the Soviet occupation, there's like long history, centuries of issues between this neighbor and us. And I suppose year 91, when it was already declared the independence, from there onwards, it was like really, really unstable years where it could go really both ways. And in some of our fellow ex-Soviet countries, it really turned bad. Armenians and Azerbaijani, they're basically still fighting more or less between themselves. There are some kind of pseudo countries around Soviet territory, like the Transnistria. There are now, of course, during the modern Russia, the Abkhazia, these Georgian neighbors, they have there quite a lot of conflict going on. And Ukraine, just last 6 years, big parts occupied de facto by you know who, and actual war going on day by day, people dying every week, and that's the kind of neighbor we have, and we just try to keep cool head and practical. But yet again, as far as I understand foreign policy and diplomacy, they need to keep all the time like their way. If they start giving in to Russia, then it's bad. Then it starts to look like any of those countries which have really serious issues. It doesn't mean that we don't have issues.
And does Ukraine, when I was in Poland with you last time, they always used to be protesters outside the Ukrainian embassy. Are they still there on a daily basis?
I don't know. I think not. I think they were like supporting or making some kind of statements there. I don't remember really well what were they doing for or against. But and besides, it's all the pandemic lockdowns now. Nobody's protesting really against anything. Although there would be a couple of things probably to protest against. Yeah.
And do them like if you had to explain basic Estonian people, am I correct to say that you guys are roughly about 2 million people, or is it 200,000 people?
The country population, I think, is 1.3 million, and this is all the people who live there. Some of them identify themselves differently, but they still were born there. They are Estonian. Maybe not citizens, but the inhabitants. Pretty much Estonians, yeah.
And are you guys also quite big into death metal, like the Swedish people and stuff? Like, is there like a part of the culture that you guys are quite big into? If you could explain Estonian people.
The metal as music and that kind of anti-culture has been always very, as long as I can remember, a very big thing there. Yeah. But, there is a stereotype, and what we'd like to think about ourselves, that we're a singing nation. That is, every couple of years there's a big singing festival, like hundreds of thousands gather on the singing ground. in capital and sing all kinds of patriotic, national, ethnic old songs and get into this kind of mood of unity and people having good time. I've been even there once actually, so I'm not very good Estonian in that sense, but you know, once I tick.
And why did you leave Estonia for Poland?
That was something like, it wasn't for Poland really. I had a break from work with the second child, and then I kind of gave in to my ex-wife's idea to let's go somewhere warm. And then we ended up in Crete, in Greece, for a while. And that was a year break, basically, stay home dad. And I was supposed to go back home and start working again and get back to Estonia and everything. And then another buddy made me an offer, invited me to this company where he was working in the Middle East. So I first went to Dubai. I was there half year. And I suppose they just figured me out and checked me out if I can do the work what they need, and then they proposed me to go to Poland, and I accepted happily. It's a little bit milder climate and closer to home and closer culture-wise, and there I came here and I liked the place immediately, pretty much. Warsaw for me is looks like amazing place. It was a bit strange though. It was general metropolitan area is like 3 million population something, and Estonia is 1.3 million, the whole country. So I had some eerie feelings, like there is so many people around me. Yeah. But then I stayed, yeah, I like it here. I stayed, work now, family, second family. That's the deal.
And yeah, because for the listeners, I met Jüri when he was with his first wife, and now he's with his second wife. So he's got basically Estonian family, and he's got a Polish family. Yeah. And your daughters, are they like a stereotypical traditional Estonian looking? Because when I think of like Estonian, I'm like thinking like blonde hair and almost like Swedish people, but maybe a little bit whiter. Is that also something that you guys look like?
I would say they look quite traditional. No, it's not really blonde. We call this potato skin color hair type. That's what we are.
And dude, why do you stay in Warsaw still? Like, what is it about Warsaw, the city, that made you stay there? And what do you like about Polish people or the culture there that's better than, for example, Estonia?
I wouldn't really go so far to say anything better. It's just different. Warsaw is somehow, I would say, slightly more livelier. Estonians are cool and literally, and that's one of the stereotypes what our neighbors have towards us, is that it's like this slow, introverted, and when you go from the outside to Estonia, you can really sense it. I had this story about this stuff actually. I went to Tallinn, to the capital, with a colleague from south of France, and we went for a little bit of a work thing to do some sales. And we showed up at customer prospects offices, and generally we were greeted pretty friendly and kind of professional, and also like curious and cool, and he was pretty happy. But we had this one encounter where the guys were after the lunch already. They were not really asking too many questions. No coffee was offered, and we just made our presentation and left. And this French guy was really like offended. What the hell? They know we are coming from so far, etc., etc. Okay, it was on the border of, yeah, it can be a bit difficult, but I tried to explain that it's a kind of culture thing also, like not to get overly friendly. It's considered like a bad tone, you know. So they were asking some technical question, and they were like, "Okay, well, thank you. We will show you out." And you know, that can be misinterpreted really as not very hospitable behavior. But I don't know. Maybe they had something going on. But that was like where I had to kind of like, I think they didn't really mean it like bad. This is just how it comes out sometimes. And Polish are very welcoming people. If they have something to say, they say, and that applies both for the pleasant and unpleasant side of the thing. So Warsaw has been kind of a growing of a little bit of thicker skin about how I relate to people. Because in Estonia, you don't hear much, anything too much, you know? People prefer not to say good things very often, and when they have something bad on their mind, not necessarily also expressed. It may come out later, though. You know what I mean? So I like the directness.
Yeah, man.
That's it, you know.
Yeah, that's what attracted me to Anya when we first met, was that I must say, Jüri's been in South Africa, so we'll speak about that a little bit later. But what I liked about Polish people was exactly the same, that they were a lot more straightforward, direct, and a little bit more honest, where in my South African culture, it's a little bit British in the sense of you're considered slightly rude if you're too honest, or if you're visually honest with you maybe don't agree with something. So, and with the Polish people, it's just quite straightforward. You know exactly where you stand, and generally, my impression with Polish people in general is that they are all very nice people. There is this weird thing, I'm starting to give English lessons again, and what I notice again, and I was reminded about the Polish culture, is when you meet them the first or second or third time, they will maybe behave like they're very strong and maybe not intimidating, but they will just come across very strong. But once they see that you're a cool person and you don't have an ego, suddenly they start relaxing and they're the nicest, friendliest people in the world. Is that the same experience that you have with them?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I have this Polish family here who I think they are very traditional in the sense that I feel that I'm adopted, kind of. Then we relocated. We got our own place, and we are on a small street. And I think it was on the first, definitely during the first month, maybe even the first 1 or 2 weeks when we had moved in and started to unpack ourselves. We heard the doorbell, and this elderly lady just showed herself in, and she said she's the neighbor here, and she gave us a lecture about anything that there is to hear and know. And just recently she was walking down the street. I said hi over the fence, and she said, "Hey, how you been? I haven't seen you for a while. I've been busy with work, this and that." And he said, "Listen, I like you very much. I consider you like my son." And I'm like, that's never happened to me in Estonia, that some random elderly neighbor lady says, like, "I like you so much, I consider you my son." It makes me feel a bit weird, you know?
Yes.
But it's, she's sweet. I said, yeah, it's mutual. She's cool. We always wave over the fence and discuss, like, gardening, you know?
Yeah, man, that's my experience too, is that I think you look a little bit more Eastern European than what I do. I might look like I might come from fucking Finland or something like that sometimes, or maybe Sweden. Yeah. But in general, you look at me when I'm in Estonia, in Poland, people do generally notice that I'm not from that area. And I used to get it when I went into the small little shops where you still have to ask the ladies, "Can I please buy the onion and the fucking shinka and the pomidor or whatever?" Like, you have to actually request the counter lady to give everything. And initially they will all be terrified because they're scared to speak English to me, and I look different and I look foreign. And then again, after like 2 or 3 or 4 times, they realize I'm a nice guy, and then suddenly they're the nicest people in the world. And even if you don't really talk to them, there's this feeling that you get from Polish people that they really like you. It's very weird to describe, but it's such a nice warm feeling.
Yeah, they're direct somehow. And if they don't like you, you'll sense that also. Like, yeah. I had this thing that I
listen. How are they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Please go.
Since I knew this Russian language kind of up front, and I came here, learning the Polish for me was not such a big challenge. So I learned these casual phrases pretty quickly with fairly good pronunciations and stuff. And that caused me a lot of issues because I go and ask my cebula and shinka and everything, and then I get like this lecture and questions more specific about what I want, and I'm like, oh, I'm just, yeah. That's happening. And that applies to many situations. Like I now I'm doing a little bit better, but it used to be a big issue. Like I say hello and how are you, and I need this, that, and then I get like this triad of questions, and then I'm like totally lost immediately because Russian and Polish, they are not so similar. They're not so similar.
Who's got a prettier woman, Estonia or Poland?
Dude, I don't know. This is something we need to look at the bigger picture here. I think there is a slight differences, but we talk still pretty much the same type of East European, North European women. It's a question of taste, I say. It's I don't know. I would say, again, Estonian women tend to be kind of modest somehow, and that doesn't mean anything bad or good, but Polish women have like this more distinct, stronger style. Sometimes people say it's Slavonic, but talking about Slavonic, you can think about also like Russian women, Ukrainian women, which is like completely different dimension of being outspokenly woman, right? I don't know if it makes any sense.
No, I get exactly what you're saying, and I think especially because I've been there, I think there's maybe subtle versus not in your face, but I think it's easier to identify a Polish woman between a group than maybe identifying the Estonian lady in a big group.
Perhaps, yeah. We don't have any specific features really. I suppose you can find Finnish women in the group. They used to have the haircut of their president Tarja Halonen. You can Google the picture later. It's a very specific haircut, and everybody used to have them back in the 90s.
Dude, if you had to look at Polish men, I always say, like, if you want to identify the Polish guy in the group, then you look for some bold motherfucker with a little gold chain and some jeans and white sneakers. A lot of times that will explain the Polish guy. Not always, but is there a way that you can identify Estonian men? Is there like certain stereotypical features?
Dude, I don't know these days. They can be really, really different, and I have to say, I haven't lived there almost 10 years, but almost, 10 years. So it's for me, like, I think there are like a couple of generations who all will be looking a bit different, but to say some stereotypical things, it's like very difficult. Maybe track pants and track suits are not a thing anymore so much. I think so.
Yeah, plus I think the generations are just changing, man. Like if you look at people our age, we are officially now in the next generation. So I think it's also a little bit like we have to specify people that were born around about our time versus the younger kids and the younger generations. They are just in all countries slightly different.
Yeah. There are generational things, and it does not reflect only how they wear their track pants, no?
Dude, remind me, why were you in South Africa, and which areas were you in here, and what were your observations? So what do you remember of South Africa?
Well, that was, dude, that's 2007-ish, I think. It's a long time ago. And it was the Gauteng area. It was the Midrand near Johannesburg, Joburg. And that was a professional training, and there was this big IT technology company who had their big technical development center and training center there for the EMEA region. So all the Middle East, Europe, Africa, Asia, all these guys were together there learning the technology. And I have later worked in the same field till now, and I hope to keep doing that. And I have met also a lot of guys from different countries, Poland, India, whatever, that are in the same branch of the business. And it was 1 month. It was quite colorful because there was like these mid-20s guys, mainly out of home in an exotic place, and nice warm weather, playing pool, having beer, barbecue, just work hard and play hard kind of a situation, if you can say that. But all went fine, everything was safe. I think nobody had any dodgy experiences, although we were pretty much warned. And later we realized that, a couple of times we were probably quite lucky, more lucky than we thought we would be. But, it was cool. It was very interesting. It's totally different place.
Did you feel at all that you are in a slightly dangerous place, and that it's maybe more dangerous than the places that you've lived in Europe?
Dude, I remember something like this, that there was people, and I suppose you say white and black pretty comfortably there. White or black, everybody was keeping distance and tried to avoid eye contact, kind of. So people were like reserved, like everybody's trying to mind their own business, and that was one feeling. And I can only compare it to something which I experienced much later in Kenya. I was also 1 month because of work in Nairobi, and that place was actually kind of, people were coming to you, getting curious. I suppose they figure that you're a tourist or something, so that's maybe a good business opportunity or whatever. But in South Africa, people were trying to stay away. But in Kenya, people try to kind of get closer to you, talk to you, and I'm like almost getting shy. The national stereotypes again.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is if you do culture training, which I sometimes provide to people over here, is that in some black cultures or Southern African black cultures, it's disrespectful to make eye contact with superiors or with certain individuals, where obviously in the white culture, if you don't make eye contact, it means that you're trying to hide something or you're disrespectful or something. So it's a little bit contradictory. So sometimes when people don't make eye contact with you, it's almost like a sign of respect. But it might be something else, like if they try to keep their distance and stuff. 2007 is also quite a long time ago. I think if you had to go back to Johannesburg now, it's constantly evolving, and it's one of the big. It's probably I think the biggest city in South Africa. It's dangerous, but recently Cape Town, I think, is competing to be more dangerous than Johannesburg.
Wow. I did not.
And I remember that the two things that you took away from South Africa, I don't know if there's more, but one is knowing what is a braai and knowing what is peri-peri sauce.
Yeah, dude, I was growing these peri-peris and different kind of peppers on my windows up until quite recently. I don't know, I have had no luck with good windowsills to grow these peppers recently, but I still have some home-cooked peri-peri sauce, which is just bad. Yeah.
Dude, that batch that you made for us like fucking 6 years ago was so strong, huh?
Yeah. I suppose to say that I still do cook this quite specific flavor of foods, which is the combination of cumin, coriander, and garlic and chili. So all my food tastes kind of quite similar, which is a thing which I kind of learned from the Johannesburg days. Chicken liver peri-peri, biltong, and I love the culinary side of any place. People, nature, nice, okay, cool. But what do these people eat? That's good. Yeah.
Coming from Europe, is it weird to see so many black people in a small concentration? Because I spoke to Virgil last week and I said to him, the weird thing for me going to Europe was living in a city where there's no black people. I just found that weird. If there's a city with like fucking 50 white black guys, it's a weird feeling. So and if there's just too many white people, it's like, fuck, something doesn't feel right. That's, I think, how most African people think. And then obviously you'll have the racists that'll be like, fuck yeah, like white only. But I'm wondering, is it some weird observation if you come from a predominantly white country into Africa and you're like, geez, this is completely different?
So I don't really know. I grew up in a land which was just white. I think I saw the first black guy in Estonia from TV. His name was Mike MLI. He was some kind of pop star locally there. And he was a celebrity because of his skin color. And, you know, I suppose we had rather like a curiosity towards different race people than Europeans. But coming to Africa, I don't remember the weirdness really. I guess I was like, okay, cool, we're in Africa. This is where African people live. And but one thing which and this is again, sorry, like it's not the South Africa. I saw there the slums, the poor people's neighborhoods, kind of driving through past one of them, and that left a weird feeling. And I think later in Kenya, I saw a couple of times the kind of folk that comes out when the night comes. And that was like Nairobi turned into something completely different. And I think it was a bit eerie to see so many poor people begging, probably prostituting, trying to hustle. Just the amount of this kind of like you can feel this poverty, and that was a bit eerie. I think I haven't seen in Europe and anything like this really. I haven't been to Asia. I haven't seen India. I don't know what that place looks like, but that was kind of strange for me. But yeah, there's
man, it's definitely
like whoa.
Yeah, man, and it's always hard to explain to people what this informal settlement looks like, because the slums in India, it's something, and then you have like almost, I don't know what you call the ghettos in Southern America, but definitely the African slums, it's quite unique and specific, and especially at the moment, man, we're going into winter, which is always like I can only imagine how cold it must be and in those areas. But this whole coronavirus and the COVID-19, it's like I listen to various people around the world talk about this whole thing, and I'm like, well, Jesus, at least you're not stuck in one of these little shanty towns trying to survive. And even if you try to isolate, it's absolutely impossible. And that's the whole fear aspect in South Africa at the moment, that some of these informal settlements, there might be 1 million people living there, and sometimes in a small a building of, let's say it's 10 square meters, there might be anything from 5 to 8 people living in a small thing like that. And like, you can only imagine the spread of the coronavirus. So we're all in South Africa, we've been in lockdown for about 4 weeks. And the reason why we've been in lockdown is they just scared that it goes into these communities, and once it goes in there, it's going to spread like wildfire. But it's not happening. So everything's good at the moment. But yeah, we're all sitting here in anticipation of almost, it feels like Resident Evil. Like it's just going to be fucking zombies everywhere, and it's just going to be crazy. But yeah, and it's sad because and that's why, one of the reasons why I'm leaving for Poland again. I find it difficult to live here in South Africa, where I'm not rich. I'm basically below middle class. I'm at the lowest level of middle class. But even myself, I consider myself rich compared to these people. And it's weird that you go between these areas of the rich neighborhoods, the rich people, and then you drive past these informal settlements. And I just find that very strange, even being from South Africa. And I think it's just the only reason I find it weird is because I work with these people and I try to train them and provide them with work. And it's very interesting.
Yeah. I don't recall I had any contact with anybody. I think we went to some of these little car boot sale kind of places where they had souvenirs and stuff, and they sold me some of their masks, and this kind of African handicraft stuff. And same stuff I saw also in Nairobi. They did so good craftsmen. They can turn basically any kind of little wires into small animals and stuff, and it's beautiful stuff. But it's kind of like, yeah, you have to do something to survive, and I suppose being a craftsman is probably a better deal than selling your body, right? I mean, if it works out, then it works out.
No.
But here, regards
definitely like
the COVID, I think in Europe we have here these, of course, South Europe has these horrible refugee camps where people are anyway in pretty poor conditions, and they're afraid that once it reaches there, it's bad. And in Poland, I think in Warsaw, there was a pretty bad case in one of those like old poor people shelters. They managed to stop it, but that's some horrible stuff that happens. In Estonia, it was the same. There was several old people's home and old people's nurseries which had the COVID, and it's just like everybody's a risk group for very difficult case. And tragic. I mean, young, healthy people, yeah, if they don't fear, then that's okay. But there are people who are maybe not ready to meet the Jesus yet, you know what I mean? So, in respect for those, should keep it safe now.
Yeah, is it difficult to be a father during this time? And also, is it difficult to be a father and working from home? Because I'm fortunate enough that I don't have any kids right now. And I can only imagine what it must be like. And you've got 2 very young kids at your house. Is that a massive challenge?
Yeah, that is a challenge. That is the home office and taking care of the children. It's like it's definitely more than full-time job here. That is, do the work, do the teleconferences, switch off the mic as soon as possible, because there is somebody running around screaming, doing something stupid. Never use video if possible. Then basically our days are starting around 6 a.m. and then there is this whole day cooking, cleaning, changing diapers, this, that, trying to spend about 1 hour in the fresh air at least, so that everybody can ventilate a bit, run, move, and yeah, that's the life now. I mean, I really I'm curious when they are going to open the schools. But being a father, one thing is being a father in this kind of isolated home environment where you just need to cope and to have a nice wife and healthy children, and this is a beautiful thing, right? It's like, okay, fine, this is high quality life problems to be more focused on your family and to consider that a challenge. But I believe there will be families where this is a big challenge. Families where children and spouses would prefer to do anything else than to go home, and my heart goes out for those who are forced between the four walls with some like raging alcoholics, domestic violence, all that shit, you know. It's all part of the culture in East Europe, sorry to say. Estonia, Poland, all the same. Statistically, it's a difficult thing.
Yeah, I read an article on BBC today that they were analyzing. We have a ban on alcohol and cigarette sales at the moment, and they were saying the reason for the alcohol ban, that it's not available to the general public right now, is because of the crazy percentage. I think it's I'm not. It's probably going to be wrong, but I think I read something like 60% of South Africans drink. And out of those, and I think it's something like 30% of the people that drink heavily. And the amount of domestic violence and the type of crime and the drinking and driving and all the variety of trauma-related incidents that happen, and the amount of people that have to go to emergency rooms, and there's a direct link with alcohol. It's just crazy to see. But I was wondering with you, I don't know if you've had certain realizations during this COVID-19 time, but for example, Anya and I, we live quite busy lives and we don't see each other regularly. And it was a pleasant surprise to see how well we get along with each other in the first 2 to 3 weeks of the lockdown. Obviously now week 4 or 5, we live in a small bachelor apartment. But it's just so nice to see that the lady I chose to spend my life with is that we just fit really nicely together now that we have time to see each other. Have you had some realizations with being with your family?
That's awesome to hear, man. We have the hands are so full of children that we almost like we need to make time and space to say something nice to each other, or at least like clear the air. You know, if there is some kind of unspoken discomforts, let's put it in a very diplomatic manner. And I really like to hear when people say that, oh, we're just chilling out, watching Netflix. Like, fuck, I would like to watch Netflix. But the other day we wanted to watch Netflix. My wife fell asleep. Oh, shit, again. Same old. But again, that's the life. In one hand, I value this experience, but in the other hand, I just think it's just so unnecessary. I mean, the amount of suffering just because somebody likes to eat bat meat. Come on. Nah, it's absurd. It's absurd. But I suppose humanity has gone just so far without such intervention coming in from the nature side. You know. So yeah, we are forced to look at ourselves and each other.
And have you become aware of any observations on society on, I don't know, how good people are, how bad people are, how some of our ideologies and how our societies are set up for failure or for success? Have you had any of those type of observations?
When I have no idea, I stay inside. I just go to shop. People seem to be keeping the distance. There are people who don't give a shit, and they look really tortured and disturbed by the whole rules of the social distancing and masks and hand gloves and whatnot. But I can tell about our own little street. I don't know how many people is here, 50 plus, I don't know. We used to say hi and have a chat with several neighbors, and now it's starting to look more like we say hi to basically everyone who we know just lives and resides on this. Dzień dobry. And it's kind of like, it's maybe me, but I'm glad to see my neighbors walking and having the mask and waving, and that's cool. But again, bigger picture may be something completely different. There will be different neighborhoods, different problems. The biggest winners of this crisis seem to be definitely the politicians, because, you know, if you manage to put this special curfews and all this stuff on, it may be really attractive to maintain it as long as possible, because it's really comfortable to do anything what any ruler really likes to do, is like impose their laws, their things, their regulations, organize elections. Dude, that's an actual thing that is happening here.
Are they going forward with the elections there?
Elections were supposed to be 10th May, I think, and I think as of today everything is still open. The postal elections is now a thing. That is something that is considered. So you imagine all these old people and sick people and everybody's taking the envelope, sending the vote somewhere. Somebody has to read that shit.
Fuck, man, I can't imagine. And are you concerned about the election and the type of people that might win? What's the vibe there in Poland right now?
Not really. I cannot elect, so I have my own opinions, but, you know, does it matter really? Does it matter? Well, since I can't vote, I can't say anything too much now. Although I do say here and there, but Poland is experiencing, I think, what many of the European countries are experiencing, and not only European countries. It's same stuff that's happening in India, Brazil, States. You know, we just see.
Yeah, man, I think it's a weird time, and the thing that I've like the way that I observe it is like if you consider like 30 years ago, if you were in the 80s and if you were in the 70s and 60s, there were normally one or two or three big bands that you could like, you know. So let's say in the 80s you were a Guns N' Roses fan or something. There weren't many other bands. And then as we went into the 90s, there's a lot more subgenres coming about. And then we went into the 2000s, and now there's so many subgenres. There's no more big bands, and there's just so many little different types of music out there. And I feel it's a little bit the same with political views, and it's just so hard to get people together to believe in something. Plus, it's impossible that one person encapsulates, or a political party encapsulates all the things that you believe in. And I think obviously that's the problem that they have in America with the Republicans and the Democrats. It's like, well, it's not like I'm 100% Republican and I'm 100% Democratic. It's obviously a combination of the two. And it's this weird thing with politics where they're just a bunch of sly motherfuckers. And it's like, can you just be slightly more honest?
Yeah, especially when there is people who really need help, especially in this kind of crisis. The crisis help packages and things which have been worked out. I don't know who they're supposed to help, but one friend of mine explained me how, you know, social security tax is being postponed. For small entrepreneurs, social security tax can be put in the balance in the way that I'm talking about Poland, that it's going to be deducted as part of from your income tax. So imagine now the guys have no work, they don't need to pay this social insurance tax, but they do have, or maybe not have, the income, so they will have to pay actually more income tax. It's like, wow, it's brilliant mathematics. And, you know, if you don't think like that, then it sounds like a really good deal, and wow, thank you. Anyway,
yeah, man,
fuck that.
Yeah, I think my time in Poland, though, has helped me to deal with this in a sense of, and I would highly recommend anyone to go visit Poland and go read up about the history. And the thing for me was meeting Anya's family and grandmother, and you meet a lot of the old people that were part of the Second World War. And there's a lot of museums and films, and there's a lot of history in the streets, and it's visible. You can see the way people lived 70, 80 years ago. And because of that, I always feel like I'm not in a position to complain about anything, because nothing was as bad as what they had to face in World War II. And although this coronavirus is terrible, it's still not as bad as what they had to go through those many years ago.
Fucking A. I mean, my grandparents met after a Siberian prison camp. Wow. They somehow, their families survived the Second World War. For political reasons, they were sentenced, like millions of others, East Europeans, to the prison camps. And after that, my mom is born in Siberia. So yeah, it's all very personal here. There is like a trauma that goes over the generations. So there comes the attitude towards this or that neighbor. There are, like, Polish have, I think, resentment towards every major neighbor. Like Estonians have, like, this one, but because that was a couple of 100 years they are present. So we don't say anything too bad about Germans these days, but Germans used to occupy and be the nobility of our land for fucking 700 years. 700 years.
Yeah.
I listened to your talk with Virgil, and really I tried to relate to this, and I think I don't have like the what you were calling white guilt per se, but I have rather the empathy, sympathy towards Afro-Americans, the people who were enslaved. Because 150 plus years ago, my forefathers could have been played in the game of gamble of cards. People were sold, bought, exchanged for horses, and that was a normal thing. People had like 10 children, 2 of them survived tuberculosis, this, that, cholera. We're doing fine these days, COVID-19,
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the weird thing to look at, is that I feel like we're losing a lot of battles, but we are winning the war with if you look at the bigger picture, as humans, we are slowly moving in the right direction. And yes, maybe this year there's a few setbacks, but, maybe, I hope so. This thing with Virgil, the conversation with him on the last podcast, it's interesting. And my time back in South Africa has been interesting. And I've been thinking about this whole white guilt thing, and it's I don't feel so guilty about being white. It's just I've become conscious about, and I think Poland helped also with that, is that I grew up in South Africa unaware of what I'm growing up with. And when I moved to Poland, I realized, but not everyone's rich. Not everyone goes to these nice schools. Not everyone has nice mountains and oceans and beaches and this type of wildlife. And I came back to South Africa knowing that, I must be grateful for a lot that I have. And then I started working with the township community, and I just realized, these people grow up completely different than us. Yeah. And maybe they grow up differently than us because of us and what our grandfathers did a long time ago. And it's not even a long time ago. Like, apartheid was still 25 years ago. So I think my white guilt, and I don't like to call it white guilt, but it's just acknowledgement, because we used to be a British colony, we used to be a Dutch colony, and I always said, a lot of the problems that we have in this country is because of England. And sometimes, even if you look at sport, there's a lot of South Africans that we don't like playing rugby or cricket against the English, because we used to be a fucking English colony. And although it's just a fun battle at the moment that, fucking English, whatever, there is some slight resentments there in my spirit, though. And it would be nice if they could just sometimes acknowledge this. And that was the whole conversation with Virgil. It's like, but should you be taking responsibility for something that your forefathers did? It's a very weird thing. And I think on a spiritual basis, that is looking after humans that have spirits. do you acknowledge stuff like that? Definitely from a political point of view and from a business point of view, you should never acknowledge fucking nothing. But yeah, from a spiritual point of view and how we're moving in the world, it's very interesting.
Yeah, I suppose we have this thing that since South Africa became not an apartheid country, but a democratic country in this African sense, at the same time our country became independent from the Soviet Union. And time-wise, we had the same starting point. We don't have any diamonds though, but you know, and we have since the Soviets left, many Russian-speaking citizens left, and many stayed, and many of them are actually not very privileged. And that's a sad subject, which is kind of like difficult. There is no direct per se discrimination, but people don't always trust between Estonian-speaking community and Russian-speaking community each other. And there are these very progressive Russian speakers who just take advantage of like free education, learn immediately a couple of languages, have an advantage of having 2 native languages basically from their home, and they have EU citizenship and all the career, and it's good. It's a good, but there will be of course poor people, and there will be of course poor Estonian speaking people that just countryside, rural areas. There's nothing else to do than just to move to Finland and start building houses for Finnish companies. That's what they do there. It's like Ukrainians come here to Poland to do such labor stuff. But yet again, it's a living, it's good money, and people do that, and some kind of broken families can be brought up like that. You know, father is all the time in Finland. That's a thing.
Mm. Yeah, man, it's very interesting, and it's like, and then the Ukrainians go to Poland, and then the Polish go to the UK.
Germany, UK. They joke here that Ukrainians in the day they are like working on the building and the construction, and in the evening they go to German classes.
Yeah, man, it's such a weird times that we live in. I spoke to my brother earlier today, and he's in Korea at the moment, and my other brother is in Vietnam. And wow. I'll give my youngest brother a shout out. He's in the hospital in Vietnam. He burned himself with some oil. So he's lying in the bed, and it's another thing, like he's lying with bandages in the bed. So again, I have a lot to be grateful for that I'm not in a position. But I spoke to my brother from that's living in Korea, and I said to him, it's just the diet and the nutrition and the lifestyle you were following in South Africa is not going to work for you in Korea, because the climate's different, the type of food's different, and the Koreans eat a different type of meal. So you have to completely change the way that you've lived your life. And it's just so interesting that the world we live in now, you just jump around between the countries, and it's very interesting for me to see how some of our bodies are just struggling to go with that. And you know, it's not like the time of my parents, where you were born in one town, you were raised in that town, you lived your whole life in that town, and all your friends and family. Nowadays it's just like, fuck, it's all over the world. It's and I wonder if you're gonna have the same thing, where in 20, 30, 40 years from now, your children is going to live in a world that you can't really help them with, because you just weren't raised like that.
I suppose it's like that, yeah. My older children, they're very cool, and I meet them regularly, but this year is going to be a bit tricky, I guess. And it's always very cool to see them after like couple of months intervals, and see what they do, what kind of music they like, and discuss stuff with them. Is really awesome. They managed to visit us just before these big lockdowns really started in the end of February. It was awesome meeting, but that was already the time when it was pretty clear that it's going to reach here, it's going to reach everywhere. That was the time when this Italy had this panic, or almost already. So. But the regards to kids and generations, it's like, I don't know, man. It's just it's really weird to acknowledge that I'm already so old that I can have like a fairly normal adult conversation with the children of some of my friends. That's weird.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. And yeah,
Listen, dude, I see that we're hitting our 60-minute mark, and I'm trying to cap my podcast these days, not to go beyond the 60 minutes really, and especially with the size of the videos and editing and everything. If you go beyond that with African internet, that's fucking terrible. And we have this company called Web Africa that I'm using as my internet provider, and they're a bunch of fucking cunts, and they screw me over regularly. I can't go too much. So I would like to continue talking, but I think just for the sake of keeping everything within its limits, we're going to wrap it up around about here.
well, some other time then. Yeah, I suppose it's cool. I don't know. The whole where you're from, where you're going, it's an interesting subject, and thanks for asking me to talk about it. It's always a bit pressure because, you know, as I said, there's just 1.3 million of us, and each time you have to like somehow explain or say something about it, it feels like it's a bit pressure. You know.
Yeah, I think that's weird, man. It's like I can't imagine growing up in a country where there's so few people.
I grew up in a village.
It is just so weird, and the
200 meters apart are houses in the village. There's fields, there's a house. You can see them, you can't hear them. Other house, same way. Imagine that, social distancing.
sounds wonderful.
It was.
I don't know, man. If I had kids and I had I'm definitely considering living like that. I don't know, but I think it's easy to choose that type of lifestyle if you've come from a slightly busier lifestyle.
Yeah, and kids will have bicycles anyway, and we were going like our radius of operation was anyway like 15 kilometers. You know, that's not much for the bicycle. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Listen, dude, I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm going to press stop recording, but we're going to stay online and continue talking. So, again, thank you so much for coming on and chatting to me.
It's my pleasure.